From Minskoff Supreme. For anyone who needs the message, diets don't work. In something like 98% of the cases, the weight is back in a couple of years, often more since it messes up your metabolism. Wellness and clean eating is just diet culture repackaged. It's a capitalist scheme trying to get you to spend $15 on kale. It's not healthy behavior. Womp womp rats replied. There's a capitalist scheme to get people to eat kale. Someone tell McDonald's that they're wasting their time selling fat and salt and sugar. The real money is in kale. From I Am Delilah. My BMI says I'm obese, but I walk 2 miles every morning, drink hella water, and eat about 1,000 calories a day. Upside down smiley face. Fudge, I cannot express this enough. The BMI charts. Dave C433 replied, I don't think someone's being honest about what they eat. Cortez46 added, it's just so obvious a lie to anyone who's ever counted calories. I've done calories in, calories out, 1,200 daily before, and it's such a pain in the butt unless you were doing volume eating with tons of vegetables and filling low-calorie foods. You can't even have a normal sandwich with bread, meat, cheese, and mayo without going over 400 calories, and that's one meal. Plus your drinks and snacks. I dare any of these people to actually film and document everything they eat all day long, like that one woman who said she didn't eat a lot, and started her day with a venti Starbucks latte and a donut. From Elmire 2000. Diet culture tells us we should restrict the calories we consume in order to lose weight and live better lives. What diet culture doesn't tell us is that the brain consumes 20% of the energy it wants us to restrict. That means when you are over there trying to shrink your body, you are shrinking your brain function too. Grouchery replied, Dr. Anthony Fauci runs more than 5 kilometers every single day. That's not his usual distance. He'd usually do more, but he's cutting back, since he has so little time nowadays. Reportedly 19-hour workdays. That's at an age of 79, by the way. He's almost always in a suit, so it can be a bit tough to judge it, but I'm reasonably confident that he's at a healthy weight too. What is it that you do with your life, random FA, that is so mentally taxing that your brain needs that much more energy than Fauci's? From AsDef897. The health benefits of pizza. Whole grain crust, that has fiber. Freshly grated cheese, calcium, fat, protein. Quality tomato sauce, no sugar added, less sodium. And joy and happiness and smiles and family time. OCR Amazon replied, I am not opposed to pizza, but why'd they pick a cheapo frozen pizza to emphasize how high quality the ingredients are? False. They could have at least picked a pizza that looks like it contains freshly grated cheese and whole grain crust. From Fitzel. Is it ever possible to get back to your original set point, or are you just stuck at the higher one since you messed up your metabolism? It will go where it trusts you. You continue to feed it properly, it will settle at where it feels safest. Username 1797 replied, Don't you know that if you feed it enough positive vibes through pizza, that is the best way to lose weight? It recognizes the yummy in the tummy and defies science to please you. From Krevia, Latvia. This comment was replying to a progress pic of a girl who started running and lost a lot of weight. I feel sad that the girl on the left felt so pressured by society and this subreddit and did a ridiculous amount of work in order to achieve the hopeless dream of being thin and trying to fit a corporate white man's version of beauty. Most men are bleep 5'3" and bleep sweetie. You don't need to impress anyone. Break societal norms, be a knight, not a pawn. Ignore society's box, become you. Join a scribbled out subreddit to find like-minded women who would dump a boyfriend rather than jog a mile. You can probably figure out what that subreddit is if you know much about Reddit, but I don't recommend getting any real advice there, because it's kind of a little bit of a hate group. Duskbug replied, But she achieved it, didn't she? It's by definition not hopeless. Someone's projecting. From Is Stoop. Why the new UK government plan around weight is dangerous. A brief run-through. In this paper, there's a subsection titled Giving Everyone a Fair Deal. In this section, the government highlights their plan to introduce calorie labeling in restaurants and cafes so people can make more informed choices. By informed, this implies lowering your calories. The policy paper highlights multiple times the increase in calorie consumption when eating in restaurants, etc. When 1.25 million people in the UK suffer from an eating disorder, how is this giving everyone a fair deal? Placing an emphasis on lowering your calories creates a hostile environment for those who are suffering. Not only will this attitude stay in the restaurants, it will leak into the rest of our decisions. This doesn't just go for people with an identified eating disorder, but for everybody who may or may not have a disordered relationship with food. Anti-Apocalypse has a really funny reply. Won't somebody think of the anorexics? Won't somebody please think of the anorexics? Never mind the global obesity pandemic, I guess, then. We don't generally arrange things to suit the exception to the rule rather than the rule. When arranging public spaces somehow deprives those who conform to the rule, or otherwise make the public space unwieldy, or unusable, or just plain ridiculous. There's no reason the 99% of people who don't have restrictive eating disorders, but many of whom do struggle with obesity, should have to forego this as a potential tool if they wish to use it. I have an anxiety disorder, and if you ever saw me break into a dripping sweat in crowded public transport, with all sorts of people pressing their bodies up against mine, you wouldn't doubt it. That's a me problem that I have to deal with, even though I know others who have the same thing. Redesigning public transport would be wasteful, and the result would be unwieldy. It sucks to have issues. Often the fix is to learn about and practice managing them, not to expect the whole world to change. I'm addicted to sugar. Yet you don't consume pure sugar. You only consume sugar mixed into foods. You are not addicted to sugar. You simply enjoy the taste of food containing sugar. Reverse Lazarus replied, pretty sure opioid addicts aren't actually addicted to chewing on poppy plants. Aka Pineapple added, you aren't addicted to cocaine if you don't chew cocoa leaves. Anti-Apocalypse gives a serious answer. Yeah, hyperpalatable foods aren't straight sugar by design. Eating straight sugar eventually trips a food fatigue response that we get when we eat a lot of one particular food. That response then tells you to stop eating that food. Hyperpalatable foods are designed to be an amalgam of sugar, fat, and salt, with consideration for other aromas as well as textures and even sounds that help you get to what the industry calls a bliss point, where you're happy to keep consuming that food, bypassing the food fatigue response altogether. You don't simply enjoy the taste of these foods. They've been engineered so that you enjoy them in precisely the way that allows you to overconsume them, both in the short and long terms, and in the literal and figurative sense. They're designed to bypass that food fatigue response that tells you to stop eating. And the industry hasn't exactly been circumspect about this in the past. They used to allow their food scientists and even EOs to talk to popular magazines like The New Yorker about this in detail. I've noticed they're clamping down a bit lately, though. Not hard to guess why. Also, while the effect of hyperpalatable foods on overconsumption is pretty well established, the question of whether or not there's a risk of inducing something that could be called addiction is still up in the air. So long story short, you might not technically be addicted to the food, but if you get angry when someone takes away your Pringles, you might as well be addicted to them. From Big Kale. The entirety of y'all uneducated assessment of health is weight. That's why y'all look at slim folks eating fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and think they're healthy because they're not what you view as overweight. And you look at fat folks with no knowledge of their diet and assume they eat poorly and are unhealthy. Flabinella replied, do they really think that there are slim folks who eat fast food 3 times a day, every day? May I introduce you to the Truth Behind Slim People documentary. It follows 2 families where friends and family didn't see the whole pictures and thought slim people eat more than they did. One character was nicknamed Skinny Cow, maybe after the ice cream. She was described as lazy and always eating, but what her friends didn't see was that she was spending 4 to 5 hours a day teaching dance to toddlers, basically spending a couple of hours exercising. What they haven't seen is that she was able to not eat anything till dinner time on her days off. Also meet a man who was nicknamed the Human Dustbin. He claimed he could demolish a whole pack of biscuits, that's cookies for my American friends, in one sitting. What he didn't say is that his whole packet of biscuits were those Bella Vitas, and he would eat those instead of a meal. Human dustbin walks about 15,000 steps every day, and even though he eats 3,000 calories in one night out, he still feels full the next day and has nothing to eat till supper, balancing his calories over 2 days on average. From Sylvia's Dead. It's time for people who happen to be smaller to stop feeling entitled to more and cheaper clothing than those who happen to be larger. Maybe it's on purpose, maybe it's just because I haven't thought about it, but way too often when I make a point about how fat people have fewer options when it comes to clothing, thin people come running in and trying to justify it, as if they're entitled to having been always considered and centered in fashion discussions. Book Hermit replied, "Wide ranges of fashionable, flattering, and cheap clothing is not a human right. But since we are on the topic of entitled, privileged people, we can talk about how the existence of cheap, fast fashion is due to the exploitation of poor people in sweatshops in India, Pakistan, and China, usually young women. I can only imagine what these girls are thinking as they sew together a 4XL t-shirt that says, 'Honor my curves.'" A bunch of numbers brings us. My local news just ran a story talking about all the benefits of intermittent fasting, and I keep hearing people in my college talking about it, and so come 2020 it definitely seems like it's going to be the next big thing. You've covered the topic before, but do you know any easy rebuttals I could give to people preaching it? I'm getting a lot of asks about this, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised that it's making the rounds again in this era, where amputating parts of the digestive tract and putting laxatives in candy are also seen as perfectly reasonable things to do. I would not personally engage in a debate about nutrition science with someone who is so far down this particular rabbit hole. Instead, I would set some boundaries, or be snarky, take your pick. No thanks, I already had an eating disorder and I don't need another one. Ooh, yeah, I've heard it's also beneficial to hold your breath for 30 seconds of every minute. I don't care about your diet, Chad. I find I feel best when I eat regularly throughout the day. So how awful was the new Star Wars movie? Make a really horrified face. No. Stare blankly, then very slowly turn and walk away. But if you really want to engage, you can check out my starvation tag for more information. Yes, the fudging starvation tag, because that is what this is. Fudging starvation. Gibberish. Taritha replied, "Fasting has a long history through many religious and cultural traditions. It's not starving. It's a tool like any other to achieve some goal. As long as your net intake is at a safe level, it's fine." Vandalay added, "It's barely even fasting for the most common types of intermittent fasting, for example 16-8. I wake up at 7:30 and have breakfast at 9:15 or so I'm going all of 2 hours without eating. I eat lunch and maybe a snack, and then I eat dinner around 5, and most days I'm perfectly full until bed. I would barely count this as a fast compared to what, for example, Muslims do during Ramadan, or what I've had to do to prepare for some medical stuff." From Pretzel Schmetzel. I used to hate people who said foods were very filling or too rich because I thought they were made-up terms to shame what fat people eat. Now that I've been dieting, I've experienced these sensations for the first time. Pretzel Schmetzel replied to himself, "I've seen this occur a lot on the posts in the sub. Fat person thinks anything a thin person does or says about food is a jab toward them, when in reality the thin person likely doesn't care what anyone else eats. They feel insecure and like everyone must be judging them. The other common thing I've noticed is that they struggle to understand that their experience is not the universal experience. They've never found something to be too filling or rich, so therefore it just doesn't exist, and no one else can find something to be too filling or rich." Sylvia's Dad added, "I used to think there could be no such thing as too much Nutella. I completely changed my tune when I went to my first IHOP, Dubai Mall. It was a pretty good trip otherwise, and I vaguely remember that they had a good view of the dancing fountain or something, and I ordered Nutella pancakes or waffles or something like that. Y'all, there was literally half a jar of Nutella that they just dumped on top of these things. It was so overwhelmingly sweet, and there was just so much Nutella going on that I couldn't even take more than 3 bites. And this was when I was a pretty established binge eater at the time, and I could have probably taken down a whole jar of Nutella by myself in about 5 days to a week. I never went back to IHOP, even though we eventually moved very near to Dubai Mall, and I used to visit that mall quite often." From Lemon Balm. Ah boy, the person who doesn't use punctuation is back. Skinny people will really be like, yes, you were bullied to the point where you hate running, eating, laughing, existing in public for fear of being made fun of or viewed as disgusting simply because you're fat and had to scrape out your own self-worth because people constantly reminded you that they think being fat is the worst thing you could possibly be, and yes, you never saw yourself represented in media except as the butt of a joke, and yes, you still despise clothes shopping because you never get to wear anything cute made for people your age because trendy fashion is almost always made for skinny people, and yes, people on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter take all the clothes in your size to make their two-piece sets, making it even harder to find things you like that fit you, and you've had diet culture pushed on you since you were a kid, but people used to wrap their thumb and pointer around my wrist, so I'm victim here actually. OCR Amazon replied, if this person hates running as they claim in line 2, they need to explain this sentence. Aver Shah, got to the question mark at the end and I was like, oh, they do have punctuation on their keyboard. I thought maybe they had letters only. From Lil Hop 420, a comment from a video documenting a woman's 600-pound weight loss. The blue marks are all the grammatical errors I found. I probably missed some. How would you expect people who have been struggling to lose weight to react to these videos? I am saying it from other people's perspective, since these major weight loss transformations are all over TikTok. It's a good thing to feel confident in yourself and to feel proud of where you've become. You may just want to share it to the world, but realize that there are people out there who could feel down to see people losing so much weight. When you'd have people who have struggled to lose weight for years and their whole life. You do this for your own happiness and feeling proud, but some people who can randomly come across these videos could be the people suffering from such weight loss problems. It's nothing to take seriously, it's just that it should be taken an eye on to realize that it may affect some people who end up watching these videos. I counted 17 errors. OCR Amazon replied, I'm driven to distraction by the use of loose instead of both loss and lose. Gains of Mind posted, except for all the times it's not a calories in, calories out issue. With some medical conditions, a person could take in 0 calories and not be able to lose weight because their cells are not able to use the calories already available to them. Metabolism is a complex body function, and if just one part of it gets out of whack, the whole thing can go haywire. I know people like to oversimplify by saying that calories in, calories out, but things are never that simple. Saying it is merely calories in, calories out is a way to blame an overweight person for something that might actually be out of their control. It's physiologically impossible for it not to be a calories in, calories out issue. It's impossible to take in only 0 calories and not lose weight. You know how humans radiate heat and have a temperature of about 98 degrees Fahrenheit? That requires energy to burn, which is what calories literally are. Your body must be supplied calories so that your body may radiate heat, among other things. That's why dead bodies are cold to the touch and why obese people feel like furnaces. They generate more heat by burning more calories. It really is as simple as calories in, calories out. Show me a morbidly obese person who weighs 400 pounds and ingests only 300 calories a day, and I'll show you an obese person who is lying about their diet. It's physiologically impossible. To wit, if it were possible, you'd also see starving Ethiopian kids who weigh 300 pounds. You don't see it because of calories in, calories out. Their weight is in their control, and they need to take some responsibility for their habits. It's not easy, but it truly is that simple. It's literally all about willpower. I don't even know where to start with this, or if I should even waste my time, because you've already made up your mind that all fat people who can't lose weight aren't taking responsibility for themselves, don't have the willpower, or whatever other BS you feel like using to justify your opinion. Maybe someday you'll be fat yourself, and then maybe you will begin to understand how hard it could be to lose weight. And I will change one part of what I said. A person can take in 0 calories and still not lose fat. If the cells cannot get calories from food due to starvation, they will start to catabolize or break down its own muscle tissues. For people who suffer from insulin resistance, they can be taking in only a few hundred calories a day but still not lose fat too. What happens is because the cells are resistant to insulin, only a portion of the calories are able to get into the cells, and so the body stores what's left in the bloodstream as fat. So until you correct the insulin resistance, the body is not able to regulate how it uses the calories it takes in. Correcting insulin resistance is not something that can be done through calories in, calories out, or willpower or changing eating habits. It's just not. Hellacious replied, the body has a very clear order in which it catabolizes. That's breakdown for people who aren't as smart as this FA, sources of energy. Sugar. Your body loves sugar. Glucose is its favorite, but it also loves galactose and fructose. They explain the chemistry behind how it uses sugar. Fat. If there's not enough sugar available for glycolysis, then your body will shift to primarily lipolysis and break down fatty acids. The last one is protein metabolism, which is your body's absolute least favorite source of ATP. It will create glucose and ketones if there's excess protein, as your body can't store it, or in the absolute last ditch, no glucose, no fat. Nothing else available, starving conditions, your body will actually catabolize and convert amino acids into ATP. Protein metabolism is its own weird thing. Some amino acids will enter the Krebs cycle like sugars, some like fats, some in their own weird locations, but invariably they produce nitrogen, which is toxic. Your body doesn't like to use protein before fat because it produces poisonous ammonium. Our body then has to work to turn it into urea, which is still poisonous but less so, and then pee it out. So, long story short, digesting skeletal muscles before fat for energy isn't something our bodies do.